Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's special episode of Hey Sister Presidential Debate episode. We are pre-gaming for the debate, and in typical Hey Sister fashion, we ask that you like, follow, share, subscribe. We might need to text a few more people. Let them know we on, girl, because I know they were like, "Wait a minute, you going on tonight?" Yeah, honey, we got things to talk about. So we hope you join the conversation in the comments. If you're watching, share this with everyone you know. Where am I getting this feedback from? Oh no, we can't do
I don't know. I don't know.
that. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Hey, my
Hey, sister.
friend. Oh, how are you? Okay, you probably should get your other guest who is because you're in a special location. You should tell her to come see this person who's watching.
Okay, I will
But
text.
anyway, just send her a text. Come, but we're gonna talk about this debate. We're gonna get into it tonight, and we want you all to join the conversation in the comments. Let us know what your thoughts are, and yeah. But before that, we got to talk about some hot topics.
Right.
Sister,
I'm trying to type.
yeah, it's okay. So first of all, let's talk about this school shooting that occurred in Georgia last week. We didn't really get into it in our last case, sister. Um, a young man has now been arrested. He's 14. His father has now been arrested as well.
Mhm.
There are so many layers into this story. But one thing I know for sure is I don't want this to be a way of life, and I'm tired of it. And I don't know who else isn't tired of it. I am tired of the fact that the FBI, he was known to the FBI, and they actually talked to the parents. And then the father decides that it's a good idea to buy him a gun
Right.
for that. That's why he's facing the charges he's facing. The mother who called the school that morning to alert them, I'm like, why did you let your son leave if he was in a mental health crisis? Like, why did you, he 14, why didn't you like take him to the hospital? Why didn't you intervene? Like, you let him walk out the house.
Hmm.
And there was the school, I guess, there was confusion about, what class he was in when they received the call from the mom, and then they went and there was somebody with a similar name, so they were in the wrong class with the wrong. It's just so much craziness around this. I just want to know, when are we gonna have enough? When are we gonna have enough?
Unfortunately, it doesn't appear to be anytime soon. Unfortunately, it appears that we want to continue to purchase guns that are not for the use of hunting or gathering food sources. We want to continue to um I mean, because for me, like when we were in school, we had fire drills. We
Tornado
might
drill.
have the bomb threat drill, right? Which was always weird because it was like, you're kind of gathering us all in one place that would make a bomb easier to go off. But I get it. Um, but now that your children have to have active shooter drills, and you know, I thought when it happened to the babies in Sandy Hook, it would change, and it hasn't. Um, the only thing that I could perhaps see is if it's a private school where there's a lot of prominent people's children. That's the only way, because that they'll seemingly uh, you'll stop having legislators who are more committed to this quote unquote um, gun rights narrative, and be more committed to our kids and their safety and their well-being. And why are we allowing them to go to school? And again, it seems like because these are happening at public schools and a lot of their schools are private schools, they feel like their kids are shielded, but they're not. Anything can happen anywhere, which is why I don't understand why we always go back to the I never thought it could happen here. Anything can happen anywhere when there are more guns than people.
Absolutely. Well, we have a comment here. It says gun legislation will occur when minority populations begin purchasing firearms in large numbers. And we
Mhm.
know, I mean, data shows that when the Black Panther Party were arming themselves in California, guess what? They implemented stricter gun legislation about who can own guns and not own guns.
Right.
I don't know. I just know that this story, we dropped one article in. Go read more articles about it. We dropped one link in here. Um, it's just sad all around. And four people lost their lives. And I don't want us ever to get numb to that.
Right.
I don't
Four
want us ever to get
people,
numb to the loss.
including a young black boy who, my understanding, is was not neurodivergent, and
Mhm.
for an irresponsible media outlet in Atlanta to incorrectly state the name of the shooter, but splash his name across the headline to say he had been arrested, but then put the picture of the victim,
Mhm.
the black child who was the victim. That infuriates me as well because that's continuing to perpetuate these stereotypes that violence only emanates from people who look like us. And that's just absolutely not true. We have way too much data to show us that that is not the case, especially when it comes to school shootings. So it
I mean,
was
when it comes to school shootings, for the most part, I mean, we do need to ask. So, I don't know why it's always turned on about uh young black men, but what's wrong with young white men? I mean, we need to ask what is wrong with young men in this country? What's the real mental health crisis, and what is this toxicity that is plaguing them, that is leading them to these to be even attracted and drawn into this? Because this next story is kind of similar in that the manhunt continues for a man named Joseph Couch in Kentucky, who decided that, okay, I'm just going to go post up on I-75 and Kentucky, and I'm just going to start shooting into people. So you mean to tell me now, you can't go to school, you can't go to a movie theater, you can't be in a grocery store, you can't be in the public library, you can't be in the opera house, you can't be in the courthouse, and now you can't drive down the highway without thinking that, you know, a bullet could be coming your way?
right.
I was about to cuss, but it's insane.
It is insane. And the question is again, why are we okay with living in insanity? Why are we okay? Um, like we often like to say that this is the greatest country in the world. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'm not sure because I haven't been to all of them. But what I do know is we like to wear that as a badge on our sleeves and say how this is such the greatest country. If it's the greatest country,
Ain't be in
why
church either. Mm-mm.
can't be in church? Yeah, if this is the greatest country, why are we allowing such mediocre, basic behavior all the time? Like what person, especially and clearly you're not a clear thinking individual, says, you know what, today I just feel like killing a whole bunch of people, or I'm gonna try to.
Mhm.
And you go out and start shooting at people on the highways.
Mhm.
So we absolutely need to change our gun laws. But on top of needing to change our gun laws, there's a condition of our heart is not good as a collective,
Yeah.
obviously. We got a lot of people who got a lot of issues. Their heart's not right because again, who wakes how you wake up in the morning and decide you're gonna bring a gun to school? I don't care how many people you don't like there. Just
Mhm.
don't go to school or change schools. Do something different. How do you decide that you're gonna go post up on the freeway and just start shooting at people?
Right.
It's something that's psychologically, emotionally, mentally wrong.
Well, there's a lot that needs to change, but the thing that is frightening now is this man is still on the loose. Now he's gone off into the woods and he is still on the loose, which means that he's still a threat at any point in time. Who knows if he will be encountered by law enforcement and what that might look like? But the other infuriating fact is that he literally went to a gun store on Saturday, I believe it was Friday or Saturday. Can't remember the exact date. You can look it up. We dropped a couple articles in there about it. Bought over 1,000 rounds of ammunition. Now, that there is no, you can't walk out of here with 1,000 rounds of ammunition because there is no hunting you're going to do that you need 1,000 rounds of ammunition unless you just are an awful shot. There's no amount of hunting that you're doing that you're using that much. The fact that anyone can have that much ammunition at one time is a problem. You know, I just think it's absolutely absurd that we allow. And like a comedian said, I can't remember which comedian said, you know what? Let's make the bullets $100 a piece.
$200 a piece. I thought
Let's
it was.
make
I
it two
think it
hundred
was
dollars a
Chris
piece. I
Rock.
mean, what do we need to do? Because this absolutely is absurd.
Well, it is absurd. And when we say, very often when we say we need to change our gun laws, we say it in the sense that we need to change like the age of someone buying a gun, or we say they need to have some kind of mental fitness aptitude or some kind of testing of some sort to suggest that they're fit. But a part of changing gun laws is changing who's allowed to sell guns and where they're allowed to sell guns. Because very often they go to these gun shows and it's unfettered access. It's not. There is not the a level of scrutiny, or like you said, 1,000 rounds of gun of ammunition. There just should have been somebody who said, that might be too much. Like,
Right.
you shouldn't be even allowed to buy that much if you're not buying for the military.
Military, right? That don't make no sense.
So
Oh Lord. Okay, so then our last hot topic, y'all, before we start doing our pregame for this debate, thank y'all for tuning in. We appreciate you. Make sure you send this link to somebody right now. Like, follow, share, subscribe. Send them the Facebook link. Say, hey, watch with me right now. Or send them the YouTube link. Say, hey, tune in. Because we're going to break down what we expect to see tonight in this debate, and we're going to run it, and then we're going to come and talk about it after the fact. But the last story that we have to get into before we do that is this Tyreek Hill situation. I don't know if he's my cousin or not, but I'm gonna just claim him. Why not? Why claim him, girl? He a Hill. We might as well claim him. Hill with no S on the end. So can we claim him? I mean, I'm just saying.
I claim Taysom, and clearly he's not our
Yeah,
cousin.
I know. Exactly. Exactly. So Tyreek Hill stand out for the Miami Dolphins, who actually went and balled out of control after this situation, was headed to the stadium. I mean, just shy of the stadium. You can see the stadium in the background. And it's pulled over by a police officer. He's pulled over by the police officer, and then the police officer goes into I don't even know what he went into, right? Other than when the fellow police officers came along, a situation that would have been a simple speeding violation or maybe a warning or here's your ticket, go on about your business, um escalated into him being pulled out of the car, put to the ground, foot and knee in the back, handcuffed. Other teammate comes over, try to escalate. He did
De-escalate.
also de-escalate the situation, like, hey, I'm here, like, hey. And it just got out of control way too fast. And there was so many. Before they released the video cam footage, we knew something was awry because they had already said one of the officers was placed on administrative leave.
Well, yeah, they found out who he was. I mean, if somebody called somebody and say, you know who you just
Yeah.
arrested, right? Yeah.
Now, this comment right here from Sharonda is so important. In qualified immunity, officers should require insurance like physicians. Yes, they
Yep.
have lives in their hands. Absolutely, I agree with this 100%. They need to be bonded, whatever it looks like. But also, as we get transition into this debate, I hope they bring this story up because
Mhm.
one of the policy positions of Donald John Trump is to have qualified immunity for police officers. So the police officers for their misconduct, there is no law that says I have to roll my window down and I have to keep my window down. There's no law that says that I have to have as the kids are saying now, be very demure and mindful. There's no law that says I have to do that. Was he a little like cocky? Yeah. Was he a little dismissive? Yeah. All of those things might be true, but there's nothing in the law that says that you have the right to then escalate the situation, pull him out the car, and manhandle him in the way that you did. Yes, he wants him to have full immunity.
Yes.
Exactly. This person who is seeking the president, because he wants them to have the same immunity that the Supreme Court granted him so
Yes.
that they can continue to disrupt and dismantle our lives and our well being. So I don't know, sister, you just learning about this situation because you've kind of been, having your own little mental detox as well.
Right.
What say you?
I say, first of all, it is ridiculous that the police union would say he was being uncooperative. Because
Well,
here's
they
the
came out with that statement real fast, honey. Knowing
they,
they,
they
mhm.
did,
They
and
always
here's
do though, don't they?
they always do. I will say this. And I might have said this story before, so pardon me if I did. Not very long ago, a few months back, I had a conversation with my manager's manager, and he was telling me about the man that ran our department. I say ran the department because y'all know I'm not working there anymore. And the man who ran that department, he described him and indicated he just wants us to comply. He just wants people to comply. And
Mm-hmm.
I said, then compliance has not really been favorable for my people.
Mm-hmm.
I know you don't want to hear that because the white man don't ever want to hear when you speak truth to power or say, as a black person in this country, my lived experience is very different from yours.
Right.
But compliance has not helped. It has not boded well for us.
No.
And so for a police union to come out and say that he was being uncooperative, no, he wasn't doing what you told him to do. And this idea that anybody has to do what you tell them to do, they don't. If you are placing him under arrest, you would tell him he has the right to remain silent. You didn't place him under arrest, so he had the right to say, I'm just give me the ticket and let me go.
Mm-hmm.
He had the right to say, you're telling him, he put up his window. You're telling him put it down. Put it down. Okay, no, we're gonna get out of the car. And we're gonna get you out of the car now. Again, I have seen videos where white men have cursed the police out, called them everything but a child of God, read them for filth, and they never get handled like this.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen another video very recently where a gentleman was like, nope, I need to call my lawyer. I want to speak to my lawyer. I want to speak. He just repeated that and they just said, have a good day. So when we know, again, I'm going to go back to the two stories that we just talked through. When we know that there are killers on the loose, when we know there are children bringing guns to school, and we treat them with kid gloves, but somebody who is driving in their car, like you said, at this point, all you gotta do is get their driver's license plate, and send a ticket to their house.
Exactly.
Because more often than not, whether it's the cameras or not, you gonna whatever you write as the police officer, it's gonna be believed. The cameras, of course, is gonna show me coming down an incline an accelerated rate because that's physics.
Right.
So write it up, whatever it gotta be. Put my ticket in the mail. Now, if you put it in the mail, you got a picture of a car that don't belong to me. Yeah, I'm gonna push back on it. But other than that, like these interactions have become too volatile.
Yes.
So why are we continuing to do this?
And in some countries, they don't even do that. Like I said,
Right.
it's like, you take a picture of the license plate like they do with toll infractions. You get
Right.
them in New Orleans, they have them all over the place, honey. You be getting you like 3 months later, you get it like, I don't even remember driving over there, right?
Right.
and, and you get a ticket. So some of these situations we need to, like we said, we need to reevaluate that ban on guns or change the gun laws. We need to change the rules of policing and engagement.
Well, and
There's
it's
a time
funny
that
that you said,
agents of the state had full immunity. They were seeking formerly enslaved people who escaped, absolutely.
yeah.
And that's what they're trying to get back to here. If you read about Project 2025, or if you live in this state of Florida, honey, don't get it twisted, because we are the petri dish for Project 2025. They've already implemented some of these laws here.
Well, and I was gonna say, speaking of that, there's a commercial because again, Arizona has become a battleground state. There's a commercial where they're talking about, they're criticizing, they're using a clip where VP Harris is saying we need to reimagine policing and we need to change how we police. And it's like they're using it as a negative. I don't understand why that's a negative. I hope that comes up as well. Like in every
They should make that ad of the Tyreek Hill arrest. Make that an ad and flip it. We need to reimagine policing.
we need to reimagine policing, whether it's Tyreek Hill, whether it's George Floyd, whether it's Breonna Taylor, whomever you want to use.
Right.
We need to reimagine
Hold the
policing
blame.
because at the end of the day, evolution is what, if nothing else happens, evolution happens, change happens. And so the idea that, as Miss Perkins Davis said, they were seeking formerly enslaved people who escaped. Right. That's the genesis of our police force. And it seems like y'all haven't changed that much. So sometimes you need to evolve and you need to change and you need to improve. And again, unlike the Phoenix Police Department, when you get a consent decree, don't be trying to shimmy your way out of following rules that other people have to implement because you ain't gonna do it yourself.
Right.
You're not trying to improve the process.
Well, you are tuned in live right now to Hey Sister. We want you all to like, follow, share, subscribe, tell your friends to catch us on all our social channels. Go to our website, sign up so you'll never miss an episode. And honey, we are about to get into this conversation about this debate. Let's see, we got one more comment here. Police should have a fundamental understanding of the Constitution. Honey, since we're about to talk about this debate, how about presidential candidates should have a fundamental understanding of the Constitution?
I think
Why
anybody.
don't we make the presidential candidates make it, because we always talk about what qualified. Only thing in our Constitution, the qualification is 35 and born in this country. Why don't they have to do, like we have to do ACT and SAT to get into college? Why don't they have to do the citizenship test about the Constitution in order to be able to apply to run for office? Why don't we do that? Because we know who would not be running for office if that was the case.
Well, that's interesting that you said that because some of the very people who, and I'm sure immigration is going to be one of the top topics for tonight, some of the very people who are so anti-immigrant in this country, and let's call it what it is, they're anti-immigrant, although they forget that many of their own ancestors, they like to tell the stories of their ancestors coming through Ellis Island. They like to tell the stories about how they pull themselves up by their bootstraps and things like that. Well, one of the things that people seem to forget is becoming a citizen of this country is not an easy process.
Unless you're born here.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Becoming a citizen, because you're automatically a citizen if you're born here, so you ain't have to do nothing.
But they try to change those laws too.
Well,
FYI.
then there's going to be challenges. Something like that is going to have unintended consequences for the people trying to change it. So I'm not as concerned about that one. But to your point, to become a citizen of this country, in addition to being on this long wait list, and then you get preferential
That can
treatment
take up
based
to a
on
decade.
right, and you get preferential treatment based on which countries you're coming from, right? And then you have to take these tests, and then you have to, go to these various classes. It is not an easy process. So when people act like just do it the right way, just do it the right way. Well, the right way is an intricate process. And to your point, if the people who are running for the United States presidency don't have a clear understanding of that process, if they couldn't pass that test, because let me tell you, those questions aren't easy.
Mm-mm.
If they couldn't pass that test, then that should be a disqualification. And certainly felonies should be a disqualification.
Felonies, and there is no low bar for non-old tramp. Hey, baby, how you about that?
I mean, felonies and this, I mean, listen, he can say what he wants to about E. Jean Carroll, but I believe she won her various lawsuits, right? We really should have a problem with the fact that this is somebody who is a rapist.
Mm.
Like anybody who's willing to commit sexual assault, and it ain't no, I mean, we know the comment that was made that was on Extra or whatever it was. So it shows you that this is somebody who, like Leslie said, there's no low bar.
Mhm. Well, let's talk about that thread. Because a recent, like, he was back in court with the case around E. Jean Carroll, and there was another woman who alleged that he groped her on an airline in the 70s, and he goes through this whole quote. And what blows my mind is, like, I don't understand why as you can see, we have what is showing there, where the debate is going to be coming on. So they're doing all their analysis, we're going to do our analysis. But he made this statement like, so this woman walked on the plane, and I supposedly just walked up to her, started kissing her, and groped her, and that would never happen. And I was like, that's exactly what you said you did on the Hollywood. You said you just
Access
walk
Hollywood. I said Extra. Thank you. Access
at
Hollywood. Yes.
Access Hollywood with Billy Bush. You said that you could just walk up to them, start kissing them in the mouth, and grab them by the pussy. That's what you said you did. So when
And
you
they
say,
let you because
and
you're a
they let you
celebrity.
because you're a celebrity. And so now I'm like, well, so you're telling us, but that's impossible. But that's exactly what you told us you did. Like, bruh. And then that no reporter in that moment didn't say, but that's what you said you did on the Access Hollywood tape. Exactly what you described. So let's get into this debate tonight. And
Okay,
so,
well, you can minimize that right now. It look like we got 31 more minutes.
okay, we got some time. All right, I'll just stop sharing that. Oh, so what do you think? Yes, and then he had the audacity that she would not have been the
But
chosen one.
and that's the thing. He said that about E. Jean Carroll.
Mhm.
He always says that. And it's like, I don't want to call nobody
No,
out.
they may not have been the chosen one because you were choosing the children with Jeffrey Epstein. Maybe that's what he meant. I don't know. I digress.
Well, all I'm saying
Allegedly.
is, this idea. So again, this goes back to it and hope, and we'll see how this plays out tonight, right? You always go to the lowest common denominator,
Mm-hmm.
which is attacking people based on their physical attributes, right? So with Kamala Harris is her laugh because God forbid she has joy in her life. With President Biden, he was old, as if you are not old. With somebody who was handicapped, he made fun of that handicap with, again, um, Marco Rubio. It's little Marco Rubio. It's Ted Cruz. His wife was ugly. And he always attacks people's well-being, physical being, or physical attributes, as if, and we see it all the time. So when someone says she wouldn't be chosen, but we know that that's the first thing you go to, is saying, oh, they're not pretty enough for me. Because that's what he tried to suggest with E.G. and Carol.
That's what he tried to suggest with Stormy Daniels.
With Stormy Daniels, yeah. So, but when we know you have a history of attacking people based on their physical attributes, it's like, how you think we believe in you on that one? Because you lie about everything in general. But how do you think we gonna believe you on she wasn't the chosen one? As if you don't always go to, again, no bar is low, but you always go to that low bar to try to attack people, to suggest I couldn't have possibly done that because she ain't like you a looker.
Well, he
Nonetheless,
did say he was better looking than Kamala Harris. I'm gonna just say that.
he
But
said
listen, let's
something to
go to
them.
what. Okay, so what is your synopsis or breakdown? Do you want to hear my synopsis or breakdown?
Well, it sounds like you ready to tell me, so you
Because
go
I'm
ahead.
ready to tell all y'all, and I want all y'all to tell y'all friends. I don't know what's gonna happen in this debate. I know they've been talking about what she needs to do, and people still want to get to know her, and this, that, and other. And he needs to stick to policy. So let me break this down. The only person who can lose in this situation is Kamala Harris. Period. If she is highly educated and on point, she might be. Look at her. She thinks she know everything. She too uppity. If she attacks, mm, she's a bitch.
She's angry, the angry
She's
black woman.
angry.
Although
She's a
she's not
bitch.
black, but
Right.
she'll be angry black woman in that scenario.
If she is all policy, she's not relatable. If she laughs, she's not serious. So for those people who are quote unquote already made their mind up. So you got those who, and a friend wrote this article about we not a 50-50 country. We're a third, a third, and a third.
Mm-hmm.
A third of the people vote. A third of the people don't vote at all. One third votes Republican, one third votes Democrat. So those who are solidly in that Donald Trump camp, they not moving, they not changing.
Right.
For those who are solidly in the Democratic camp, they not moving, they not changing.
Right.
For that other third who might be bendable or flexible, she has all of those mental machinations that we just described in their mind. And confirmation bias is real. So there are people who are going in who have been watching or maybe listening to the news, or maybe those who haven't been listening to the news, but people are going in to confirm whatever they already believe.
Of course.
And so the person who has everything to lose is Kamala Harris. Donald Trump does not speak in complete sentences. So for anyone to continue to suggest that he just stick to policy and we went on policy, he has never spoken about policy. He has never done a complete sentence in any of these things. We saw them ask him the question about childcare, and he went on this roundabout. And then if you read it, see, that's why also what I want people to go back and do. Because people talk about that last debate in February and June and how horrible Joe Biden did. If you read the transcripts, Joe Biden at least had coherence. Was he slow? Was he obviously tired, sick, all the things that we have come out, but he still was coherent.
Right.
So off top, that's where we are with this going into this debate tonight. Um, what I know in terms of preparation, knowledge, clarity of vision, she has all of that in spades. It's how is she going to show that in a way that it'll be appealing to those who are looking for a reason to cast their vote for her. So that's my synopsis of what I think is at stake right now tonight. What about you? Because this might be the only debate they have. Will likely be the
It
only.
likely will be the only debate they have. And I agree with your synopsis, but this is what I will say. Like you said, a third vote Republican, a third vote Democrat, a third don't really vote. So I really don't think there's a quote unquote undecided voter at this point, because the two candidates are so vastly different
Mm-hmm.
that if you're saying that you're undecided, it's like it's literally choosing between an apple and an orange. Like, I mean, if you just eat fruit, I guess. But if you're like, I want to eat an orange, then you're not going to pick an apple. If you say, I want to eat an apple, you're not going to pick an orange. So I'm just very, it's always very interesting to me at this time, especially it's September. This is 2 months away. It's very interesting to me when I hear
Well,
people
not
say,
really, because early voting is starting soon in a lot of places.
absolutely, absolutely. So it's less than 2 months away. So anybody who's saying that they're still an undecided voter, that's a little questionable for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I agree with all the things that you said, which is the unfortunate piece, right? Because the bar is always higher, I would say, for women in general. It's always higher for women. It's always a different standard. And, we saw what he did when he debated with Hillary Clinton. He basically was stalking her on stage and trying to physically intimidate her, which was a problem and should have been stopped. Um, and now it's okay, Kamala Harris has to come out and please everybody in
Mm-hmm.
a way that is absolutely impossible. When this, again, if you're looking at these two candidates, they don't have much in common.
Mm-mm.
So really, it it falls where it falls in lines to what each voter thinks is most important. And listen, I've heard people who will say, they did better financially under Donald Trump, even though the data doesn't show that. They believe that. So even though they might be like, yeah, he's a meanie, he's a bully, but my finances were better.
Well,
But I'm not, whether it's real or perceived. My thing is this: I've never been the person who votes based on only what happens to me. I don't have kids, so does that mean that I should be like, I don't care who on the school board, that's y'all children?
well,
No.
according to JD Vance, if you don't have kids, you shouldn't have nothing to say.
Exactly,
That
according to
part.
him. And what I will say is, and if that's his position, then make sure I have nothing to say by not having to pay no taxes either. I want
Mm-hmm.
to make sure, like, I want to have nothing to say. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to pay a tax. I don't want to have. I want nothing to
Mm-hmm.
say. So yeah, I just think that this idea of you have to get to know her. Why? You don't know him? You ain't never met this man in your life.
Mm-hmm.
But what you do know about him, again, felonies, buried his ex-wife on a golf course so he could get tax cuts, has made, as was alluded to, some very disturbing statements about his own daughter. Uh, thrice divorced, 3 times married, I guess only twice divorced. Um, you know enough about him, right, to say
Character. Mm-hmm.
exactly character and integrity. Um, so to say you have to still figure out what about her, what do you need to hear?
So let me go into. We got a couple comments here. It
Yeah,
says too many people in our community simply don't vote, and that is if you're talking about our community as the Black community, absolutely, and that shows in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, where you are approximately 30% of the population, and what does your representation looks like. We need to address that to make a change. I
absolutely.
posted a video earlier today on my Facebook feed where Dr. King, was talking about we need to march the ballot. march to the ballot. I have to find, I'm gonna go find that link and drop it in here too, because we need to understand, and even then he was talking about South Carolina where he was doing the speech, how they actually saw change. And even if you study history, South Carolina was a very um, integral state right in the Reconstruction period, with the number of Black officials that they were able to elect. So history is very, very important. And we need to let history be our teacher in encouraging people to go vote. We have another comment here. It says, I think people are who are still undecided because they
I
feel
think there are people who are still
I
undecided.
think there are people, thank you, who are still undecided because they feel she is part of the current administration, although she is not the current president. They are disgruntled about kitchen table issues. They want to hear her vision of how she will have solutions to their issues. And this one is the one that really, because there used to be this thing about the greater good. There used to be a thing about like even things that are bigger than yourself. And so I really want to know what those kitchen table issues are that people are talking about. If it's the prices of products and goods, let me tell you, tariffs will make those prices and goods a lot higher. And so if that's the issue, if we're talking about,
I
you know,
think we are talking about the price. I said this before. I think we're talking about the price of eggs and the price of gas, and and childcare. And yes, those kitchen table issues are very important. I'm not trying to underestimate that. But I do think we also need to have a very clear understanding about what the president can influence and what the president cannot influence. Now, when we talk
especially
about,
when they don't have a Congress.
especially when they don't have a Congress to support them. Now, if we talk about some of those kitchen table issues, for example, um, inflation, right, is the result. Whether people want to, agree with this or not, the inflation that we're feeling now is still very much the result of the pandemic, those supply chain issues that we talked about, our dependency on China and Chinese goods. All of those things play a part in it.
Also,
And
the avian flu that everybody that we've had to kill, all the reason why eggs are still high, we've
so we had to
had
kill all the
multiple rounds of avian flu where they've had to kill all the chickens. We had the bird flu jumping into the cows and jumping into some humans.
right.
That's the thing that, and at the same time, our stock market is at an all-time high and corporate profits are at an all-time high. So there is something to be said about corporate greed as well. So when
Right.
you
I was going to go there. I was going to
start
say,
pulling
why
the
we talking?
thread and look a little different, who's impacting your kitchen table issue? It is it's bigger than just that one person who holds that office.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. Corporate greed is absolutely a real thing. You shared with me earlier today about or a few days ago, about Spotify CEO making $345 million, and how long it would take an artist on Spotify to make that same amount, and it would take them having over 15 billion streams in 1 year. When you have companies like
And
John
there are
Deere.
not 15 billion people in the world.
Right. And then you had John Deere very recently that had record profit, and they were doing all these stock buybacks, and they still opted to lay people
Lay off
off.
people.
You have a lot of these very big companies that are choosing to lay people off, but their CEOs are not, their CEO pay hasn't changed. And they'll say, yes, that's what I was about to go to. And they'll say, well, we have to work in the best interest of our shareholders. And so very often those shareholders don't look like the people around my kitchen table who matter to me. So
But
for me,
let me pause you there for a second, because actually they are, and I don't think that people understand that. People need to look at their 401ks People need to look at their retirement accounts that they may have on those jobs and who those companies are invested in. And you need to start speaking up and having an understanding. And I know that's what this comment, unfortunately, many Americans don't understand the difference between the power of the president and Congress, right? We need basic civics back. But people also don't understand that, yeah, actually, oh, I'm not in the stock market. If you have a retirement account, you absolutely are in the stock market,
Yes, you're correct in that statement. But what I'm saying is the main shareholders, the largest shareholders, that they're making these decisions to appease. Because you're right, all of us have 401ks, or not all of us, many of us have 401ks, many of us dabble in the stock market in other ways. Um I don't know about y'all. Like, I get those emails to join the calls. I don't usually join the calls. Every now and again I vote, and I don't always vote on who the board of directors is. So you're right. Yes, the people around my kitchen table are shareholders, but they're not the largest shareholders. And they're making decisions based on how the largest shareholders continue to profit from their decisions. And who typically feels the impact of that is when your team is cut in half, but the amount of work you're expected to do remains the same. And those half of people, those numbers that people just spout off numbers, oh, they cut 300 new jobs, they are 300 jobs, oh, they cut 50,000 jobs, whatever it is, there are people behind those numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And
So,
so another thing I want to speak to about the debate. So there's a person who owns this platform called X, and this company called SpaceX, and this company called Tesla. I want people to, anytime someone's telling you that they want less government, you need to look at who they're giving government contracts to. And so this relationship, this insidious relationship that this person who is very outspoken, who actually seemingly wants wants our
so he wants to
very
destroy
existence.
this earth so he can go live on Mars and
Yes, he
populate
wants to destroy the
Mars for
earth so he
himself.
could go live on Mars and
And
that
father the children, because he's a volunteer. Like, I'm not making that up. He literally said he would volunteer to be the vessel
but
to populate.
I will let you know that, and you can do the search yourself. Just type in how much government subsidies does Tesla SpaceX receive, and it's over $4 billion. So why do you think this person is trying to have such an outsized influence in this election? Because they want to preserve. So the his wealth was not made off of his own ingenuity. Don't ever believe that or get that twisted. Government contracts played a large role, and you always should look suspect when someone says that they want less government intervention, but they're trying to intervene in the government in a very big way.
Mhm.
Always look with the third eye, listen with the third ear. Shout out Joe Madison, rest in peace. That, just letting y'all know.
Yeah, I'm just drop this here because this was the the headline of that that particular article.
Yeah.
Mr. Musk has volunteered his sperm. So, yeah, look, so he is one as
And
an
that's
example.
related to this debate tonight, in that the influence, the outsized influence of some of these large corporations who make profit but are subsidized by our tax dollars and then
Right.
wants to take our rights away from us.
Yeah.
And I don't know
And that,
how that gets addressed. And I know when we're talking about kitchen table issues, like you said, keeping the lights on and keeping food in the cabinet, but there are some bigger things at play that have immediate impact on our life.
Well, I'm not gonna say that if they're bigger things because I don't want to minimize those kitchen table issues are very important.
I'm not
But
minimizing them. When I'm
yeah,
saying
but
bigger,
just let
I'm
me
just
let me
saying
just
there's
say this though. I think that there, like I said when I posted this earlier, in Arizona has 3 pages. Our ballot is going to be 3 pages. In some counties, it's 4 pages. So when we talk about those kitchen table topics, a lot of times what happens in your local government
mm-hmm,
are the things that really are going to have the day-to-day impact. You know, the stuff that you're going to feel. You're going to feel if, the what is it, Mothers of Liberty come into your school board
yeah,
and take out the duly elected school board president and start influencing policy.
mm-hmm.
Um, you know,
Removing books.
removing books, banning books. I was just watching this video about this outside in like this desert area where I'm at near outside of it's called California Forever is the name of the project, and it's funded by these billionaires, and basically they're saying that they want to build these utopic cities, right? But what they're doing in the process is they're taking farmland from a lot of farmers, and they're doing it in nefarious ways. But
Mm-hmm,
one of the ways they're doing it is by paying off people on the city council. They
mm-hmm,
are paying, giving large amounts of money to certain city council members so that they can vote in their on their policies, vote in their favor, right? So those are some of the things that happen that are much closer to us
mm-hmm.
and will impact our lives. And when you think about, they're saying, we want this utopic green, these green utopic communities. But when you think about it, if you're still in farmland or you're pushing people off their farmland, you're doing all these despicable acts to take their land, how does that bode into wanting a utopic society?
Mm-hmm.
And how does, the loss of farmland impact us every day? I just was listening to this lady here where I am. It's like, if we keep destroying the bees, then they can't pollinate.
Yeah.
And we have environmental issues that we are completely ignoring. But there are things that we have a greater opportunity to impact seemingly on a local level than we can on some of the federal level. And then there are times when we do need to jump to the federal level. But yeah, I think that when we talk about the kitchen table topics, are issues. They are very, very important. But then if people don't understand the powers of each of the branches of government, then you can't be mad when the judicial branch does one thing, but the legislative branch does something else. But then the executive, like, you have to know what the powers are if you want to say that they're impacting your daily life.
And so I want to just clarify because I don't want to sound like I'm being dismissive or diminutive or poo pooing like the daily kitchen table issues. Trust me, we deal with them every day in our household. Paying for college, paying for gas, utility prices. Yes, we deal with those every day. What I'm saying when I say bigger is that when you pull the thread a little, you'll see that, oh, all of these ramifications, implications, all of these other things are connected to it. And it's always something larger at play to pay attention to how it impacts your kitchen table, how it impacts your bottom line, how it impacts your day to day life. And so as
Yeah,
we talk about this debate, tonight, I know that where I live, there's a lot of infrastructure projects. You know, Well, a couple comments first. We got one that says Musk in Silicon Valley chose Senator Vance. Child, listen. Even with federal Affordable Care Act funds, if state legislatures and government do not accept Medicaid expansion, it impacts local health care. Absolutely. And
Right.
so that's what I mean by there is bigger, and there's always this through line and this thread that we have to connect the dots to understand. So, what do you want to see and hear tonight? I want to see and hear about the actual positive impacts that the Biden administration has had with Kamala Harris in the role as VP. I want to see her and hear about her vision for the future. I also want to see and hear um, actual answers to questions. And I want to see and hear the moderators actually moderate and not allow a torrent of lies to go unchecked or unresponded to, that that's not actually a fact. What about you? And hey, y'all, drop in the comments. Join the conversation in the comments. Drop in the comments what you want to see or hear tonight.
I just want to hear complete sentences. I want subjects and verbs to agree. Um, I just I want us to be able to, people say very often that this country is divided, and in a lot of ways, obviously, it is. I don't think that it's something that's new, though. We've been pretty divided and divisive for quite some time.
You mean since inception? Because literally people were running from the British rule.
Sure. And so part of what we all know is that in order to resolve and solve problems, you know how when you're married, they always talk about how communication is so important. Well, that's the thing. If you want to solve issues and resolve problems, it seems like communication is one of those very important things. And communication is not just talking, it is also hearing. But the fact of the matter is that doesn't make for good TV. And that's the unfortunate piece, because we're dealing with somebody who used to be on a reality show. And so for him, this is about good television. It's not about issues or facts or anything like that. Because if he does that, if he literally ever stayed on point and talked about the issues and did so in a coherent manner, it would turn off the primary portion of his base, the MAGA
I don't
faith.
think it would turn them off because they have bought the golden calf.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. And if he didn't give them golden calf behavior, they would not. It would not work. It would not work. So, um, yes, I would like us to be able to stick to topics. Um, like the first debate, that whole golf conversation, we don't need that. We
Right.
don't need to go down those kind of rabbit holes. Um, I agree with everything you said, but I'm going to start with low hanging fruit. Can we just have complete sentences and well thought out responses?
Well, Tamiko says she wants to hear facts and truth. I don't know where that will be heard, but we'll
Well,
see.
listen, facts and truth are these days in the in the eye of the beholder, I guess,
Honey,
because
well, Kellyanne Conway on the first day said there's alternative facts. So, we'll
yeah.
see what depends on what facts and what truth you're speaking of. We have
Mhm.
someone says we have had divisions, but never in an environment where the Supreme Courts are actively taking rights. Absolutely. There's another thing I want to say in terms of qualifications. Kamala Harris is the only candidate that has served in two branches of the government. She's served in the executive branch and the legislative branch. The only branch she hasn't served in is the judicial. But she has served in executive and legislative branches, even when she started her career out in the state of California. So I don't think we've ever had a candidate that's done that. And Lee said the Gish Gallop is a rhetorical technique in which a person in a debate attempts to overwhelm an opponent by presenting an excessive number of arguments with no regard for the accuracy or strength, with a rapidity that makes it impossible for the opponent to address them in the time available. What you might hear a lot of tonight. I'd have no doubt of that we are going to hear a lot of that. And we're going to turn the volume on. And if you want to listen here with us, feel free, because we're going to come after the debate and we're going to talk through the commercial breaks.
We have the entire news division keeping an eye on everything. We are going to be fact checking on our live blog. It's all going to be happening.
Honey, somebody needs a fact check on the live blog. I hope so.
Seconds away, and we will be back with our post-game show as soon as it's over. We are going to toss it right now to David.
That's the problem, that he calls it a post-game show. It ain't a show.
Tonight, the high-stakes showdown here in Philadelphia between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. Their first face-to-face meeting in this presidential election, their first face-to-face meeting ever.
A historic race for president upended just weeks ago. President Biden withdrawing after his last debate. Donald Trump now up against a new opponent.
The candidates separated by the smallest of margins, essentially tied in the polls nationally and in the key battlegrounds, including right here in Pennsylvania.
And
still
how
very
is
much
that
in play.
possible?
The ABC News presidential debate starts right now.
This is an ABC News special, the most consequential moment of this campaign. Kamala Harris.
Together, we will chart a new way forward.
Donald Trump.
We will soon be a great nation again.
Face to face, historic. The ABC News presidential debate. Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, I'm David Muir, and thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for two candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion. One of them is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that Xi and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounced back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response. And you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions, very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well,
to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea and how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free, but they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress, do it. But the fact is that for years, they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer
That's
the
problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question. Would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people
I'm
on
taking
television
it from the city
saying
manager.
their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper, he was no good, I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier. So let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris,
FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy
President
with a fake
Trump.
Russia investigation
We do have a lot to
that
get
went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on longstanding work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your response?
First of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead. Fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when
ask
are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the president of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The president of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
that.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they
there was
said
no
we didn't have standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did, in fact, lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart, Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president. But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is up.
I think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters, because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror, and they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approved the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe, because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Woo, child, girl, turn on, girl.
Yeah.
You can come if you want to, husband. My husband is back here. What? You gotta come down. She missed a few hits.
Answer the question, then go off on his ass. The first question, she was nervous.
Yes, she was nervous.
But come on now. You got to come with some facts too. Crime is up. No, it's not. Put the numbers out there. No, inflation is down at its lowest rate in the last 3.5, 4 years. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
but
let me say this, and I always think of old Mr. Hill, Dr. Hill. You really can't use facts. You cannot be rational with irrational people.
It's not for him though.
I understand it's not for him, but even if she put it all out there, right? She would be rattling off numbers, and as Demetria said earlier, then it would be, oh, she's not relatable. She's not talking about the things that matter to me every day.
Oh.
It's always a fine line. At the end of the day,
15 seconds to say.
Yeah, I mean, fair.
5.6. Right now it's 3.2. Oh,
fair. It has to be done how Bill Clinton did it at the DNC, where it's like over this many years, 51 million jobs were created, 50 million under Democratic presidents, 1 million under Republican presidents. You have to throw that out there, and then you have to bring it back around.
Also the 1 point. Yes, we actually relieved $1.2 billion of student loans.
Yes, that was.
Right.
I'm like, hold up. What you mean? No, that would have 25,000 people who got.
But that's because she's trying to respond to the questions that's being asked. He's going off on these tangents, which she is then trying to keep on the.
I agree, Demetri. She is doing a balance mix of fact checking and being relatable. Yes, she has. Like I said earlier, she has the most to lose because she gotta play all of these roles when
she's got to play all these roles, and he can just be the crazy old man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The voting public doesn't want to hear stats. They are living the stats. She needs to focus on her making herself relatable.
The stats of
it's called the
1.8 billion. It wasn't the weed. Ain't nobody trying to explain it like the tariff situation. Don't be stupid, America.
He is falling into the bait trap. I think he's falling into the bait trap.
He fell into it. He was falling into it the first 2 minutes because that's him.
Right, and we know that's him. But again, the people who believe what he says, they love that. They think he is.
Why you gotta watch her face and he ain't gotta watch his big old.
You gotta watch her face. Because she has a higher standard because we black.
We know that.
All right then.
That's why she can't sit up there and do all them facts.
I know.
Because then they're gonna be like, she too uppity.
I'm not.
She thinks she knows too much.
This is how you present it. Bill Clinton did it in 10 seconds with the 51 million piece.
He did.
You don't have to do a 3-hour soliloquy on it, but you got the numbers. You got the numbers from 2000 and how inflation is now. You got the numbers on how many jobs that you made, how many jobs were available in 2000 and what you got in 2024. It takes 10 seconds.
I hear you. I agree that she is baiting him. He is getting flustered, but she still is again.
When that Negro said they eating cats and dogs.
Well, I knew that story from earlier this morning watching the news that was gonna come up, and that's something that he and JD Vance are talking about, and the people in Ohio are like, no, that's not happening. Like, okay, you about to go back? Yeah,
I gotta go back up.
His base loves his foolishness. He's not expanding his voter pool.
Thank goodness.
We call the Dame Rock slip. We call that the Dame Rock slip. She has said several times that he is an embarrassment and he is showing it. Absolutely. But
he's only showing it to people who see him as an embarrassment, right? There are people who clearly, if he's
Yes,
up there
to make him look crazy.
Yes, AF, you right.
Yes.
Yeah, I wish.
Okay, let's go. No, 30 minutes. Okay, here we go. Let's put this sound back on. All right.
We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch?
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander in chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words. So I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young Black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first Black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page.
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
She
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
Thank you,
That's
Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
the
President
former
Trump.
president has
No,
said
I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry.
I
We're
just
gonna
need to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this is
multiple
now
times.
your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said at the time, because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice President Harris,
in terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of...
She made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable, but we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News president.
All right, sister, I'm gonna let you go first on this one. We got some.
It's first of all,
I want him to stop saying words with S in them.
I mean, it's one of those things where you really cannot. There is no measure of logic, facts, truth telling, no making it plain that works for someone who does not operate in that format. The format is, how do I continue to just sow seeds of division and hate? And I do so by just saying off the cuff things to make her have to respond to such ridiculous assertions. But I will say, I think she's doing a much better job than I would ever do, or most of us would ever do, in terms of keeping her cool. Because just like the whole conversation about Israel and Palestine, he brought in Ukraine, have no idea where he was going with that. He keeps saying that these things would not have happened. And it's like, let's look at all the stuff that did happen while you were president of the United States. So this idea that none of this stuff would have happened is a little absurd, because like you're not God and you can't make things happen or not happen like that. But again, I think it just boils down to, look, if you want,
You coming in here again? Come on.
if you want somebody,
You mad?
if you want somebody who can put together a cogent sentence that has foreign policy experience, that can meet with leaders across those who you agree with and don't agree with. You know, I was just responding about on Facebook about the sorority party comment, because that wasn't even about the actual sorority she's in. She was at the Zeta Phi Beta conference when she then met with Netanyahu like the next day. So just it's lies. But when somebody peddles in lies, what you gonna do?
And Netanyahu also
The
went
truth
down
ain't
to
in them.
when Netanyahu also went down to Mar-a-Lago, and I don't believe, just as he interfered with the border bill, I don't put it past him to say, hey, keep this war going.
All right.
I don't put that past him either. So I'm just saying that.
I know she wanted to call me MF one time.
On Facebook, what did her lips purse? I missed it.
No, you know, she like, I don't know what to call him.
Oh,
I really want to call him MF.
No, she said, I don't know what to call him, because she's trying to be respectful of the office.
And not the ER. Because she had a YouTube comment when she said her favorite cuss word when people get on nerves is the MF, but with an AH. You know how we see it.
Oh my God.
That shows her black.
Yes.
Yeah, because honey, this thing about blackness and the jobs, again, they taking all the jobs.
Wait, no, but wait, we have to we gotta dissect that really, because we didn't even get to dissect that. The prisons, the mental institutions, right? But then they're taking the jobs, all the jobs from the black and Hispanic people. So what you're saying is that the only jobs that we seem to, because I guess this is the definition of a black job, right? The only jobs we actually occupy are those that
murderers,
killers, rapists, but you know,
can do, because
and those who have no mental capacity.
So they're letting all those folks in.
Yes. And they're taking the jobs. It's like when people say this man is not racist, and then he thought he was hidden when he said it wasn't $400 million. Child, was more than anything our parents have been able to give
David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Let's listen to these
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever ask them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
And we are here live on ABC with our post-debate comments. I'm Martha Raddatz. It was a lively debate from the economy to abortion to Afghanistan. They had it all, and it was historic, John Carl, fiery.
Wow. That was quite a debate. And I'm Jonathan Carl here with, of course, Mary Bruce.
But that's the point. Scott. It wasn't quite a debate. I mean, I hate when they say that, when they try to make
our live
it wasn't quite a debate. Anyway, well, look.
Fact checks. You can find all of that on abcnews.com. But I would like to replay the moment at the very start of this debate, because it was quite a moment.
Yeah, because he wasn't going to shake her hand.
He wasn't going to shake her hand.
And
Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris.
Thank you.
I mean, quite a moment, first of all, because we hadn't seen a handshake. We hadn't seen a handshake in a long time.
She initiated that one.
And
yeah, she did.
I mean, not only did she initiate it, she walked over to him and sought him.
Okay.
Oh, she's gonna make him shake her hand. Absolutely. Yes, she should. Because you're not gonna disrespect me, disrespect the office that I've earned, and then think that you're going to get up here and try to disparage me. No, be a man. Like she told him in her thing, say it to my face. And so he had a chance. There was nothing that he said.
I love this. He is a bleach blonde, bad built bully baby. How about that?
Yes.
Fun.
There's so many things. So the concepts of a plan, we've been having concepts of a plan for healthcare since 2015. And it's like in 2 weeks, I'm gonna have a plan. We still ain't no healthcare plan or policy. Stop it. Stop the lies for that. I think there was some missed opportunities, as we talked about on the first break, for her to kind of really go into some of the more poignant facts. I put in, I dropped in the comments about what her policy positions are, or even just to say, well, as a person who has now held office and have been in the vice presidency, I have learned more things about these issues, and that's why my policy positions may have changed,
Right.
but my values do remain the same. I think even in that way, that because for him to say he takes absolutely no responsibility for anything. He clearly don't understand how tariffs work. He clearly doesn't understand how economic policy works. And that was just very evident. We got another comment here. This was a really great debate. I don't know if it was great, girl, but I'm going to say now. Kamala solidified herself as for the people. She was firm and clear on her policy position. She didn't allow him to paint her as an angry Black woman. She forced him into temper tantrum defense. It's going to be interesting how this is spun and what the spin are going to look like, and what, as you said, if you turn to Newsmax or if you turn to Fox News, how they're going to position it, because it's probably going to look very different than what we saw with our eyes. Because I didn't see a lot of complete sentences.
Yeah, I had to stop taking notes because it didn't make sense to take notes. It was just going to be exhausting for me to try to take notes when.
Let's talk about the dogs and cats, though.
No, I don't want to talk about no dogs and cats, because y'all know damn well ain't nobody out here eating no dogs and cats because they are immigrants from.
But let me finish. So I heard that story this morning that they had floated it out yesterday, the day before. And they're specifically talking about this town in Springfield, Ohio, where there are some Haitian immigrants. And so again, they're making it a racial issue.
They're making it a racial issue. Let me tell you something. First of all, okay. You say Haitian immigrants. Now, first of all, if the Haitian immigrants was cooking some dogs and cats, they'd be the first ones in line to eat them. Don't tell me nothing about what folks eat. We eat crawfish. Don't tell me nothing about that. And we know it is not even happening.
Let me see. We got a couple comments. They took their pets. They can position fiction however they want. As for me and Kamala, we deal in facts. I got you. Give that woman a gold fishing rod. She knows how to bait a hook and catch. Yes, give it up. She did that. Brian Tyler Cohen debunked it with receipts on Facebook. Absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely was a false story. YouTube. Either way, they debunked it.
Either way, it's a false story. And it's ridiculous.
There's so many falsehoods.
Yes, and that's the thing. That's what is. If you've never dealt with somebody who is a
pathological liar,
thank you. Then you get so overwhelmed by like the number of lies they say so quickly, so freely, and without any level of. Like there's nothing, it just comes out. It's like they don't know the truth. So you get so overwhelmed by that. It's like, I can't attack all of these things. I can't debunk all of this stuff. So, she had her talking points. There's a lot of things that I do wish, like you said, she would have hit back a little bit harder. But the main thing was that this fella just throws stuff out there. And for anybody who thinks about the responsibility, at least for me, if you think about the responsibility of the presidency of the United States, I can't have somebody who comes unhinged that quickly. I don't like somebody who doesn't know how to follow a train of thought and respond to the question that is being asked. I do not like somebody who lies and they have absolutely like no conviction. They just lie. I can't deal with that. And I certainly can't deal with somebody who keeps talking in superlatives all the time. Like I had the greatest economy. I had the best. I did this. I did that. It was the greatest that anybody ever saw. There's absolutely not a piece of evidence, a shred of evidence that he presents. And like you said, last but not least, somebody who doesn't take responsibility for their actions. So, I just had to post on Facebook, look, if anybody aligns to this and if it makes sense to them, go ahead, unfriend me. Matter of fact, just block me because we don't have nothing in common. We just, we just not the same. I can't even do it.
As she said, that is the weave. That's what they call it, the weave. Trump wants to get his Peter on. I'm here for it. Go and The town newspaper has a headline saying the police received no such calls. Not one.
But he said he was going to look into it again because that's what they said. He said, hold on to that.
But the people on TV said it.
Yeah, the people on TV.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that's not sad. I heard it on the internet. The people on the TV said it. What? I was like, are you kidding me? That is just I love the line about he was fired by 81 million people, and I'm hoping we can make that 90 million people this time. 90 million people. We need y'all to fire this man once again. Come on, he's what else that I wrote a couple. I do like the focus on the future because again, we don't live in the past. We only have one life, and that is forward. And so how do we want to move forward? Do we really want this retread? And as you said, the temperament piece. If you can become that unhinged,
right,
and in this second potentially time in office, you will not have responsible people around you because you will surround yourself with more sycophants. That's the threat of World War III. That's the threat of our country becoming unhinged. That's the threat of us becoming third world. That's the threat of us, falling apart. We're not a failing country. We're not falling apart.
Wait, I just got to Sharonda's point. That is probably the same time where kids and furries and also get gender affirming care at school. I certainly know one thing. The other, what was it? She's getting transgender care for illegal aliens, or she's getting like what? What are we talking about? First of all, why are we calling people illegal aliens? Because when he said aliens first, it was like, wait, what? We getting transgender surgery for aliens? It's very confusing. But yeah, I see JD on there now. He's smiling like a Cheshire cat, as they say.
JD can't speak to me on that about this abortion.
Do you want to hear him? I don't.
I don't. I have had enough for the evening. This is why I've been staying away from the news, because Donald Trump will have you listen. We got to as they say, you are what you eat, you are what you consume.
Yes.
And if we keep consuming the fuckery and foolery, the F and F that he keeps dispensing out there, it will get into our spirit. We find ourselves trying to fight with people to try to get them to understand stuff that we don't even need to be having conversations with. Mm-hmm. Let's get out, let's vote, let's do the things that we need to do. Folks who's been sitting on the sidelines, get off the damn sidelines. If you in the middle of the road, pick a side and come on and let's get this done. Because like you said, what's going to end us in World War III is when you go after your political rivals because they don't agree with you. When you continue to stack the bench with people who have no loyalty to their actual job, the only loyalty they have is to you.
Yes. When state legislatures keep floating out this stuff in the state legislatures and there is no federal backstop. Yes, right. Absolutely. And so
slavery was also a state issue.
Yeah.
And so anytime somebody says something about, I don't need to have an abortion ban because it's a state issue. It's a state issue. You know what? When they decided to implement Jim Crow laws, there were Jim Crow laws at every state level too. They had different laws. So sometimes you do have to put in federal laws to ensure that people are being treated the way they're supposed to be treated.
That's why we had the Voting Rights Act. That's why we had the 13th, 14th Amendments, the 6th Civil Rights Act, all of those things. Absolutely.
Right.
She almost came out for real and said, this I felt the MF in that. We already saw the Republican plays the long game with, of course, we need to do the same on every level. Absolutely. So vote.org, go to when we all vote, make sure you check your registration status, because there are, again, the only cheating I hear of is usually on that other side. So check and make sure that you are registered. Check where your polling place, because ours has changed a few times in the last in this year, 3 times this year, and it ain't good September.
And
Check
get a plan. Get a plan.
Have a plan, and get in your phone and your contacts and text everybody that you know and tell them to do the same, to make sure their registration is there. If they're going to vote early, have their voting early date that they're going to go. If they're going to do a mail-in ballot because they need to, that they need to go ahead and put in that request. If they're going to go souls for the polls after a Sunday church service, make the plan, but have the plan, vote early so that you can get out there and make sure that on the actual election day, anybody who may be on the fence or who needs a ride or who needs to get to the poll, that you can help and support people, because I absolutely believe and feel we cannot go back and the president of the United States and the vice president only have limited power. The executive branch only has limited power. We have 458 congressional seats up, the whole House of Representatives, and I think 33 Senate seats. Give them somebody to work with who is going to write legislation that they can actually sign that will make a difference in your life, at the kitchen table, on the job, in your schools, and as you're driving down the highway. You need to have government policies that make your life better, period. Right. And what we heard from the former president is not going to make any of our lives better.
If you could decipher it, it's not. So I think with that, we've been on 3 hours. Blessings.
Peace and blessings, y'all. Have a good night. We'll see you Sunday.
Listen.